Okay. It tells us we are live. Let's double, triple check if it's true, because you never know. with technology, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our live. I hope that this is going to be a fabulous, short little interview and chock full of information. I'm certain it will be, because tonight I have a really, really great guest. I'm so excited to have Dr. Natasha and with us today. And, I get to ask her all those questions whenever I'm with you guys. I'm like, you know what? You should check with your pediatrician. But so here we are checking with our pediatrician. So first, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us what you do, where you live. Tell us a little bit about, who you are and your mission in the work that you do.
Sure. So first of all, thanks so much. This is such a joy. I'm so glad that we were able to learn from each other and be here today and share with your audience. I'm Natasha Bergert. I am a general pediatrician. I'm in the Kansas City area. I was born and raised in Nebraska, did my training in Cincinnati to learn how to be a pediatrician, and then came back here to Kansas City, where my career has been for the last 13 plus years. During that time, I also got married to my husband, who's also a pediatrician. Together, we have 2 kids. I have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old. So navigating all of this upside down world as 2 working parents with a middle schooler and an elementary age kid, just like so many of you. And meanwhile, trying to keep our practice running. So I still work full time, and I'm in a very traditional direct patient care office, doing the well child checks and the sick checks and the ear checks and the shots and all that kind of stuff. And in addition to that, I do have a passion for writing. And early in my career, I found that so many of my patients were obviously turning to the internet to find information, and we're looking for really good sources. And so for the Kansas City area, I really wanted to be a voice for families to get information about child health and parenting between those checkups, because a parent knows there's so many questions that happen between the yearly visits that we get to see each other. So try to contribute my voice in that way to our local community.
That's amazing. And I love it. I always like it when, we get a little edge, right? When we go, I'm a parent too. So it's nice to hear, right? And we have similar age groups. I have a 12 and a 15-year-old. So it's I don't have an elementary school child anymore, but it is important to be able to, we have that little edge. So let's start right away with the questions. And I think that a lot of people believe that as professionals, we don't have challenges at this pandemic times. I think some of the parents that I work with are like, but are you also working? I'm like, yes. So I wanted to start off with, what has been your greatest challenge as a parent during this quarantine time? What do you think has been a challenge for you?
I think our biggest challenge, we had 2 really active kids, and all of a sudden the world stopped, right? And I think we were so used to, just like everyone else, just so used to our routine. We were doing it. Like you had the schedule, and you had all the travel, and you're going all these places and getting your kids where you need to go. Meanwhile, you were trying to, work in your own career and kind of do stuff during the day. And when everything stopped, it really was like, oh, what, hi, nice to see you. Like, again, like, what are we going to do together? How are we going to make this positive? What are our new goals? Like, it was almost like a little new reintroduction. Not that I'm not with my family all the time, because we are, but I think in a really different way when everything else stopped. And so then it became, like I'm sure everybody else it was kind of cool for a few weeks. We got out the board games and the puzzles and really got to have that quality time. And then after a while, when we realized this pandemic thing, isn't going away after 12 weeks, been that stress of, okay, now really what are we trying to accomplish as a family? Because we need to get a little bit more direction here instead of just hanging out in our pajamas all day long and just hanging out. Like, we really did have to kind of get together as a family and decide, if this is the new reality right now, what are we trying to accomplish together? Just so we could all kind of mentally and physically still make progress as we approach such uncertain times.
Yeah. Same, the getting out of that, a pattern, a really nice pattern that we had as a family, that is so true. And me, it's also been, everything having so much, like, I every decision seems so important right now, where in the past it wasn't. So, it's going to be nice when you can, make another kind of like silly decision. I kind of love those today. I love that. Okay, I'm just gonna have an apple. It's not that big a deal.
So for me, I think we realized too, like, how many decisions were made for us, right? Like, it's kind of like you were automatically going in the trajectory that everyone else ahead of you was going. You're just following everybody else and doing the suburban thing,
Yeah.
And now we're getting to a place where these choices are anxiety ridden because we're all navigating. There's nobody ahead of us. We're just all going together in one big line and hoping, trying to support each other through the mess
and the uncertainty and the mess. Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. Same here. I miss my pattern. I miss my routine, and creating a new one, like you, it has been a challenge. So what about as a pediatrician? What do you think has been your greatest challenge as a professional, as a pediatrician at this time?
Yeah, I mean, being a pediatrician, I mean, outside of your job, Lena, like, it's one of the best jobs in the world, right? So, like, we get to talk to kids all day and play and get hugs and see like new couples become parents and see these, little kids become big kids. And although we all have hard days in our work, like, pediatrics is so fun. And so one of the biggest challenges since March is this isn't fun. Like, this is hard. Things are changing all the time. I'm giving advice one day that's not accurate 2 weeks later. I feel like, you're kind of constantly either letting someone down because you don't have everything they need at the moment, or, I'm kind of tired of always being the bad guy. Like, telling new families with these new babies, and they just want their grandpa and grandma to come over and visit, that, like, now is not the greatest time to do that. We have to change, like, our reality of and our expectation, and constantly kind of being that bad guy, for lack of a better word. Like, I'm like, it's challenging, because usually in my career is my daily life is so joyful and positive. And of course there's still joys that we are finding every single day, but since March it's been very different.
Yeah, of course. You're doing exactly like, my challenge. My challenge currently with parents is what you're doing for parents, which is telling them, hey, I'm giving you the answer to how to stay healthy and safe. Right. And I find myself continually telling the parent, like, because they're the bad guys at home. Right. So it's letting them know, your little one does have to, practice putting on that mask, and they do have to, it's like, we can't avoid it. We have to teach this little person to put on that mask, and, buy 3 different textures to see which one doesn't bother them as much. Right. But same, I think a challenge for me, also has been to not have enough time, both. I always tell people I am not busy. I have an abundantly full calendar that I manage well. But recently I feel like I'm not reaching as many families as I wish that I could reach, because I recognize how I recognize how so many families are nervous about things that they need not be nervous about, right? Everybody's imagining. Um, everybody keeps using this. Everybody keeps using the word trauma. That this is traumatic for children. And I just recently heard Tova Klein. I love her, Tova Klein. She's amazing. She's a toddler whisperer. She has a book, I think, called The Toddler Whisperer. And she was talking about, and I agree with her 100%, you know, this idea of this is not trauma. This is hardship. This is stress, which is very different than a child suffering trauma, right? And I think that a lot of parents are walking through their day-to-day thinking that not being able to go to their preschool or their school is traumatic. And it need not be. It could be, depending on how the people around the child respond. So for me, my challenge has been, it's like, I can't scream it far enough, right? Because like, I feel like there's a lot of bad information out there around this, right? And I think that's my challenge. It was like, I want to scream it through the mountaintops. Like having you on today is like, okay, let's get facts, because facts always manage and takes care of fear.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and I know that a lot of, or parents of very, very young children that, you know, are feeling so guilty because they're so used to finishing those beautiful circles of connection with their babies at night after they've picked them up from the preschool because they leave their jobs at work, you know,
Right.
and they don't do that anymore. And then they're feeling guilty about it. And I'm like, no, it's okay. You're not hurting them. So I think that's currently I'm like, I want to stand in a mountain somewhere and be like, it's gonna be okay. That's like my fantasy. It's like, breathe. So, okay. You said something really thought-provoking in a panel that we shared together. And it stayed with me, right? And you talked about how simple decisions like going to the park, going to school, getting in the car and going to Target, have all of a sudden become, you know, moments of you know, anxious responses and stress, right? So I wanted to ask you, you know, I don't, and a lot of people are also asking both of us, well, what are you doing? What are you doing with your family? What are you doing with your children? Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily think that it's necessary for us to answer what we're doing with our families, but what is your guidance to your families about making decisions at this time? Because like you said, things are changing so quickly, especially in the medical aspect of it, mm-hmm. in the physical health aspect of it. What are your two tips for back to school sanity? What are your 2 tips for decision making?
You know, I think it is tough because it is so uncertain. And I think what needs to be very clear, especially with our own children, is that we really don't know what this virus does to kids. We don't know the long-term effects of this virus for our children and for ourselves, should we become ill. We are learning more and more. We have amazing scientists, international scientists, that we are learning more and more about this virus and this disease every single day. But until that day comes where the windshield gets a little bit more clear about what this virus is doing, our risk stratification when we're making these decisions, in my opinion, still has to be a bit conservative. And I say that because we just don't know as much as we need to know before we can kind of let off the brake and make those decisions be a little bit easier. So what I mean by that is we really have to respect our own families, and in a way that we haven't done before, almost kind of put on blinders to what our neighbors are doing and to what our friends are doing, and even our own family is doing at times, because the risk stratification for every individual family is so unique. We've got different health risks. You have different temperaments. You have different individual tolerance of risk and risk mitigation. You have some kids that are very amenable to change. Some kids are not. You have some parents that are working at home and their boss is being incredibly flexible. And so balancing the work at home and the school at home is really not that big of a deal. You've got some families that have multiple generations in their homes. You have some families that rely on grandparents for companionship and care. I mean, every family is so unique. And so we have to just make the decision with what we know today and move forward with what is best for our individual family. No excuses, no turning back. We can always look forward and change direction. But in the moment, we have to get the information from trusted sources, make the decision, and take the next step forward. We can't just be just spinning in despair, because getting more information is not necessarily going to change the outcome. You need to just make the decision, take the next step forward, and you can pivot in the future if you need. There's been some really good guidance from the CDC actually on going back to school for those of you guys who need a little bit more objective direction of going back to school. On their website, they actually have this really cool checklist.
Ooh, nice.
Multi-page checklist.
And this is the CDC.
Yeah, it's the CDC. It is called the back to school decision making tool. And the reason that I like it is because it's completely objective. Let's take the emotion out of it. Let's take this perception of trauma out of it, right? This perception of loss.
Yes.
This perception that, the doomsday feelings that we have about it. Let's just look objectively and look at our risk factors, look at what our school is doing, look at our community rates, look very objectively. The tool is not going to tell you to go to school or not to go to school, but it's going to make it very clear. Are you a person in a low risk category or a high risk category? And I think that can be very helpful, making the decision based on what you know today and being able to pivot in the future.
And most people don't know what to ask themselves.
Right.
So that is a valuable tool.
Right. Because you need to know about your own family, you need to know about your community, and you need to know about your school. And once you get those things in place, now, of course, in the Kansas City area, this is easier said than done, because we still have not gotten a lot of emails about the details for our school, right? So we're all, you and me included, making these decisions a little bit blind because we don't have all of the data points. Again, we're going to take what we know and take that step forward and move forward, and we can pivot in the future. But that's one tool that I think is helpful. To take the emotion out of this decision, because everyone's emotions are running so high.
Right. And, for me, here in Miami-Dade, the school district is starting online. Mm-hmm. And they're going to make to open up the schoolhouse, because our numbers are the way that they are, they're being cautious. And then they're going to tell the families that are in the public school system on September 30th. So those of you that are listening that are in Miami on September 30th, they will tell you again what the new procedures are. But, I like to say, because, we were talking about earlier, how, my, tips, I think, I always like to think about when I give tips to parents, it's like, okay, what are we going to do Monday morning? Right? Because sometimes we get so heady, right? Sometimes we, and I think that it's like, okay, what do I need to do Monday morning? And, Monday morning in Miami on August 31st, a lot of the kids, both in public and private school, are going to be back at school the majority of them in a virtual learning setting. And I would say my number one tip for parents is, if you have children under 10, make sure that you're within eyesight of them for at least the first week. Because children get up off this desk, this beautiful desk that you created because you saw it on Instagram. With all the accoutrements and the stuff, I keep repeating, less stuff, more love, less stuff, more presence. presence, not
Mhm.
presents with a T, right? Because that little person will go find you when they get bored.
Mhm.
Or, and if you're nearby and you see them look up, you can give them that quick smile or that quick wink, or that quick, one of those, and then the child has that connection because, for sure the little itty bitty ones, if they're securely attached, will check in with you every 10 to 15 minutes, but the older ones check in with you too.
Mhm.
Right. So for me, it's like, yes, set up an area. No, the couch is not a good area. you know, if their little feet are dangling, expect them to move their body, but that's okay. Some children move their body to focus. They
Uh-huh.
give themselves physical input. So I would say, set up a space, set up a routine, and let the teacher teach. If your little person is looking up in the sky, just stay quiet, but it's about the pattern. So, and I have also, you and I agree on something, that once you've figured out where you are with your risk tolerance and where you are with your own family, I 100% agree with you about putting on the blinders and just saying, okay, we're going to check. And I've actually told parents, okay, give yourself due dates, tell yourself, okay, in 2 weeks, we're going to sit down again as a family and we're going to see where everything is at, since this is such a fast moving, target. But we're not going to, we've made a decision and we're not going to think about it again until whatever, August 29th. So I think, yeah, because then when your brain starts talking to you, you can say, no, I'm not changing my decision until August 29th when there's more information. And it sounds like this thing kind of keeps changing every 3 weeks.
Yeah, no, that allows, I think, some mental space, right? And maybe a little relief from that decision. It makes take a sigh of relief and you can press forward for a couple of weeks, because I do think that that's important. How are you advising your families when, we're all kind of struggling in that own balance? But a lot of my kiddos that I care for, they have like attention issues, and they're a little hyperactive. They have unique learning environments that suit them well. How are you advising parents in their environment to promote success for
Right.
kids that may need a little bit more help to get the work done?
Right. With a lot of the children with learning differences, or, that actually do have an educational plan, my number one recommendation is make sure that you're advocating for your child. Make sure that you have good communication with their new teacher. Make sure that you check in with them about, this was the plan that we had last year, but what are you thinking about this year? A lot of the kids that do have some learning differences, or, a lot of them weren't able to get the extra help and the therapeutic help that they needed over the summer. So the other thing that I'm also letting parents know is, like, give yourself, at least 3 weeks of messy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Give yourself the space and the acceptance that, try to experiment with them. Not everybody has the luxury of being there and sitting next to your child while they're doing their schoolwork. Some people are also working, but if you can, I am recommending take a couple of days, that first day back and maybe the Friday of that week, and tell your child, I know that you're going to make mistakes, and I'm okay with it. We just have to find what works for you. And talking to the therapist that was working with them before, to the occupational therapist or the speech therapist or the educational therapist, and be like, okay, what are some tips? What are some hacks? And if at all possible, breaking up their day into segments of work and release, that in a perfect world, we would have been doing that at school for them as well. So
Adults
yeah.
need that in their own work day, I mean, we all need that on our own balance in that work day too, especially my parents. It's not good for our parents to be stuck in front of computers and constant Zoom calls all day long either.
So that's a perfect segue to Okay, Doctor Wood, tell us, what is the AAP saying about screens? We had previous recommendations. Have they changed? Has there been accommodations? What exactly is the American Association of Pediatrics saying about the screen?
Yeah, so we're having debates about that a lot. I'm on the Council of Communications and Media for the Academy, and we're in these back channels because trying to figure this out too. And these are experts on screen time, and we are trying to figure it out. Keep in mind that the original guidelines from the Academy of Pediatrics, they were evidence-based, right? I mean, we had stacks and stacks of research that made our recommendations valid and promote health and wellness for our kids. The 2-hour entertainment screen time rule that everyone knows is not arbitrary. Like there is evidence that supports the 120-minute mark. Well, that took 10 years of compilation of data to figure out. I mean, these are high-level studies of how the brain works and how the brain responds to screens. We are not in that environment anymore. We are in an environment in which education, entertainment, connection, figuring things out, are everything from how we're cooking food at home now because we don't know how, to unwinding on Netflix. We are relying on our screens for our connection and for our maintenance of our health and wellness now. I still do think that some kids do better with screen time than others. I think some kids are doing better virtually than others because of that, how their brains are responding to the instruction on the screen versus the instruction of a real live instructor. And I think that is another one of those situations where you may have to put the blinders on and say, my kid doesn't learn well this way, and so we have to make some exceptions.
Yep.
As far as the screen time rules, we're just really not talking about them anymore. When I talk to my parents, practically speaking, I think about a marble jar. And I think about all the cool things that make your family a family, whether that's working out together or devotional time or going to church or going on your walks, playing games together, whatever those things are that make your family traditions and make your family a family, those marbles go in the jar first. And so if you have all those marbles in the jar, and today was a good day, and we all did some yoga today, and we took a walk, we got outside, we got to be in nature, we did our instruction, we made it through our lesson, those marbles are already in the jar, then fill them up with screen time. The concern of filling up the screen time in a jar that's already full of those marbles that make your family a family is a lot less concerning to me than if you fill up that jar with screen time and then you try to jam those marbles in the top of the jar as an afterthought, right? That's just thinking about screens a little bit differently and still prioritizing those key elements that make your family a family. And again, that's different for every family. For us, that's mealtime. Like our family mealtime for our family is like, that is our biggest marble in the jar. That is where we connect. That is where we prioritize. That is where we talk about our day. So if we have that jar in there, I know my kids have worked out. I know that they've done their school lessons, all that kind of stuff that's filling up that jar. Then, I'm less concerned about all the time we've spent on Fortnite and YouTube.
I like to tell parents, think of screens as like nutrition. Make sure that it has variety. That try for the screen not to be just one thing, and I love this marble. I'm stealing that. I love the marble concept, right? And actually that's a really great visual for concrete school-age children, right? Our family's gonna have to put in these marbles before we put in the screen marble into. That would be really nice. Like get like a little tiny jar and actually physically see it for that concrete brain of the school-age child. That would be marvelous.
I think we have to, if nothing that we've learned over these last few weeks, it's flexibility, right? Like every day is not going to be the same. No. And our job as parents is not to totally recreate the school day, right? Like that's not our job. Our job is to get all those building blocks into place and get those marbles in the jar that are going to be important. But what that looks like on Monday is sure not going to look like what it looks like on Thursday, because I've got, 5 Zoom calls on Thursday, and I know that there's going to be more screen time, and I know that I'm going to be more distracted. But you know what? On Friday, I've got a good 3-hour block that I'm going to make up some time and really have that connection time. So allowing that flexibility, I think, is super important, because I think people get so heady about the 2 hours of screen time in that 24-hour clock, when really it's thinking about it, I think, a little bit more broadly. Some days you've got 4 or 5 hours of screen time, and other days you just touch the screens. That's a healthy balance.
And not all screen time is equal.
Right.
So that's important as well. And variety, use it wisely. If you have a 45-minute meeting, your 7-year-old can watch 2 22-minute episodes.
Yes.
That's because
teachers too. I mean, this is their connection. This is a mental health break for them. This is how they're connecting with a lot of their friends. At least my daughter certainly is. And so spending time doing a FaceTime with one of her friends, to me, is productive time, is not negative screens, it's positive screens. And we have to look at those things that our kids need for those connections too.
Yeah. The screen has become the play date. The screen has become the park. So did they see a friend? Did they speak with a family member? They were there on school. Okay, maybe you watch a TV show, but together.
Yeah. Perfect.
Okay, so many parents are so concerned about COVID that they're forgetting to go to their well visits, and they're skipping their vaccine schedules. And, I have that top of mind, because a lot of parents are afraid, right? I took my children to their well visit, and I also called the office, and I was like, so what will you say to parents when they say to somebody like me, well, Lena, I just don't feel safe taking my child to the doctor right now. My pediatrician's office is at a hospital setting, and I have to go into the medical building of the hospital setting. And I'm like, well, but the vaccine schedules are so important, so help me. What do I say?
That's a great question. Those are all very valid fears. And I think that they're also very much driven and fueled by the images of the chaos that we're seeing in certain areas of the country and certain medical places, right? So especially in March, I think parents in our area, in the Kansas City area, saw the stress and the chaos that was happening in New York City, and assumed that it was happening also in Kansas City, when it wasn't the case. Like, we were literally sitting, waiting for people to show up, like because the kids were out of school, the kids weren't sick, there was nobody there. So the first thing is we really have to understand what's happening in our own communities and how our individual practices are handling it. I have talked to pediatricians all over the country. We have spent hours bending over backwards, figuring out workflows, changing our offices, making sure that the well kids stay well and the sick kids are cared for and seen in a safe place as well. Like, we have deconstructed the pediatric experience, adding virtual care, limiting waiting rooms, doing more things outside. I mean, we are bending over backwards because we know that we want to validate that fear. I understand that fear. But what we are fearful of is another measles outbreak. What we are fearful of is pertussis. We have got, especially in the time of a global pandemic, we cannot afford to have outbreaks of other vaccine preventable diseases happening in our country right now. That cannot happen. Pediatric visits are essential because they are essential. So just like you did, Nina, I'm calling my office. I'm saying, listen, I mean, how many times have I heard this? I'm scared. I don't. Can you just talk to me over the phone? And then, like, can you just bring the shots down to my car? 100%. Yes, I will do that. Like, you need to call and just talk to your doctor. In the next 12 to 24 months, you will have to seek medical care. We need to accept that. You will have to seek medical care over the next year. So now is the time for you to make those phone calls and get very comfortable and understand the workflows and the procedures that your healthcare providers are doing to keep you healthy, to keep you well, to keep those shots on time. And I will get off my soapbox.
No, stay, because it's one of those things. It's so important. A child is a whole system, right? Before we were talking about, we're like cars. You would never not give, gasoline and oil to your car. So I think that, we have to keep them healthy. And I did. I called my pediatrician's office and I said, hi, so walk me through the procedure. What? And I just spoke to the front desk person. I was like, what's going to happen when I bring my kids? Can I bring them both together? Do I have to wait in the car? What are you guys doing? And yes, exactly like you said, very different than in other times. And they were great. And
did you feel safe?
Yes, and I did it. It was like us in the office. I love it. It just felt like it was us. So it was nice. But I think it's very, very important. So let's get to other questions of like kind of day-to-day questions that parents are still dealing with. That what I promise, which is like I always tell parents, well, talk to your pediatrician. But so one of these things is that when a child has a feeding issue, not one that we can diagnose with, an intervention for occupational therapy or speech or something like that, but just kind of like it's that piece where a power struggle has become that, like a strategy, a habit has been created. I tell parents about Ellen Satter's division of responsibility, which is this idea of like the responsibility in feeding is the parent says what, when, where, and the child says how much and if they eat. And I personally love this model, not only because she has done, her center has done tons of research around eating and eating disorders and best practice for feeding, but also because it makes sense in the idea that eating is a biorhythm. And I think parents forget, it's like we don't force our heart to beat. We don't force our digestion. We wouldn't even imagine of doing that. And yet we try to force sleep and we try to force eating, like somehow, like if we have some control. So I always tell them, look, if your child tells you that they're full, they're full, their little tiny stomachs are full. So that's when, but you do what, when, where, right? And to me, the most important piece is the when, right? Okay, every 2.5 to 3 hours, offer your child something and nothing in between. And then that's when a parent opens up their eyes like this. And they're like, but he will never eat. My doctor would never allow this. They look how thin he is. And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, we ruled out all the other things. We've ruled out gastrointestinal, we go into all the things, and then they're going to, he'll starve. So as a doctor, am I messing up? Am I telling, what can a child, refuse to eat for a day and survive? Like, tell me medically, is our advice over here okay?
No, your advice is 100% okay, and we share the same advice. There are many, you have to lean on your pediatrician. We look at those growth charts. There's a few different things I'm hearing in your story. Our perception, our parental perception of our kids being heavy or skinny is most often incorrect.
Ooh, love that.
All right. We cannot micromanage somebody else's feeding, pooping, or peeing. And I would not
I'll point to that.
anyone to micromanage my eating, pooping, or peeing, okay? The more we try to do that, the more in a reaction, kids are going to try to take control of that. There's nothing more powerful than having a clenched jaw when mom's trying to jam a spoon in it. There is nothing more powerful than a toddler can do that. But most toddlers can survive on hugs and air for many, many days. Most parents just don't give them a chance to even declare themselves. I also tell parents that outside of kids with medical issues, outside with kids that have traumatic experiences around eating, like a significant choking event, for example, kids are not going to choose to starve, okay? They're not going to choose to have the hunger pains in an environment where food is going to be offered. And it may not be exactly what you desire them to eat, but they are going to eat to respond to their nutritional needs of their body if you let them. I'm not a huge fan of tricking kids and with smoothies with spinach and putting different flax seeds and different things to like trick their body to, I think that makes us feel better thinking that they've had spinach that day, but really if they're not choosing to eat that food, they're not experiencing that food. And although I could talk a million years about that, I think the biggest thing for my parents that I want to understand that we talk about even when they're 6 months old, even in those first few bites, is that the eating environment is probably more important than the actual food itself. And if your environment is creating stress and control and anxiety whenever that kid's butt hits that chair at the dinner table, they're not going to be a good eater. No. So you got to kind of let it go. And for some parents, that's very, very, very hard to do. Some cultures, that's nearly impossible to do.
Yes.
But most of those kids, if we can, using experience in our back pocket, even the pickiest eaters, I put that in quotation marks, they do great when they go to school because now they have their own control and they can eat with their friends and they can eat what they want. And so I think we all learn a lesson from that the kids are going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said something powerful, if I ever went back to school, I'd get a master's in neurobiology. Is just so fascinating to me, this brain of ours, right? And it's that association. If I have a negative, if I'm 4 or 3 and I always fight with my daddy when I eat, A plus B equals C, then I don't eat. Mm-hmm. If I don't eat, I don't fight with daddy.
Right.
Because they don't know why we eat, right? So okay, good. So the next time they go like this, I could say, okay, did you watch that live with Dr. Natasha? It's going to be okay. Yeah. We're going to, you're going to, breathe and tell them, okay, mommy, the food is here for you to see. Because I tell them that too. I've seen it in the preschools. They Educare, which is that national organization that funds some preschools in the country. They did a study and they found that a young child needs to see a new food 45 times before they try it.
Mm-hmm. I believe that. And that could be too. They've also done some really interesting, for a little bit older than 3 or 4, but a really interesting study too. And a lot of my parents have had a lot of success with this too, is if they can serve themselves, they eat better.
Yes.
So and family style, and some of our daycare centers are doing that now too. So they can work on their fine motor skills. Mm-hmm. They can see all the food. They can choose what they like, and they can choose how much of it that they want. And that also increases diversity. It increases volume and gives them a sense of control, as it does us when we open the doors to our own pantry, right?
Correct. And and so then again, what, when, where? Yay. Okay, good. We got that one off the table. Okay, so sleep. Parents of young children can talk about sleep until the cows come home, because poor parents, yes, you are sleep deprived. And I always tell parents, please, we use this as a torture for criminals of war. So, we do, the FBI, they kept Noriega awake with guns and roses in Panama to get him to come out of his house. So you and Noriega, you're feeling the same thing, right? So I'm dating myself. I often tell parents that 4 to 9 months is kind of like the critical time to help the baby create their biorhythm, right? I always tell them that morning nap is very important, when they come awake, because it kind of sets the rest of the day. Make sure they're having that early morning nap. Wake them up, talk to them, take them outside if you can, let them feel the sun, and then bring them back, and and be conscious of that their wakefulness spreads a little bit, but be very conscious of that. And inevitably, especially in my neck of the woods, with the different Latinx cultures that are in my community, where a lot of us, a little person still has a bottle at 3 years old, dangling on, I see the little ones on. They worry about that they're waking up hungry. Now, I always say, well, in your next visit with your pediatrician, ask about weight, ask about, and find out whether your child still needs that nighttime feeding. But again, that's another one where they're like, right? So what about the nighttime feeding? When does it medically usually, what are the things that you look for as a pediatrician when, okay, we're done? The child is now just breastfeeding or taking that bottle for soothing rather than nutrition.
Right. And I think, I'm going to caveat this with, some people are totally cool. Some families are totally cool feeding their kids 24 hours a day, like especially those little ones with the bottles. And so I don't want anyone to ever think that they have to force themselves to do any sleep training, because you don't. I would say that the most families though prefer it, because we need our sleep too. And I do think that sleep is a discipline, sleep is a training, and it's our responsibility as parents to teach it. Most of the research, whether you're formula fed or breastfed, supports the notion that by 4 months of age, your liver is mature enough to hold enough sugar, hold enough glucose to be able to go 10 or 12 hours without eating. So most kids by the age of 4 months, regardless of breast or bottle, because I also hear that argument, like it's different from the formula, but a calorie is a calorie, and so it really doesn't matter. But as long as the kiddos are growing well and are developmentally ready, which is a great check-in for that pediatrician at that 4 month mark, that's when I start hitting the sleep training hard, if parents want it, because I know physiologically that baby's going to be able to have enough glucose, enough energy to be able to keep that rhythm of life happening for that 10 to 12 hours. I think if you do it early, I start talking even at that 2-week visit with those itty bitty tiny babies, I just want parents to have a plan. Like, what matters to you? Does it matter that they're going to be up 3 times a night? Would you like them to be sleeping through the night? You got to just have a plan, right? You got to know what your family wants, because if you know that eventually you want that kiddo to sleep and not eat in the middle of the night and not be hungry, then you've got to start planning for that really early. And just like you said, Lena, like, you have to start teaching them that rhythm, that day-night rhythm from very early on. Because if you just let them eat whenever they want to eat, which some people do, they never really learn the difference between day and night. The kid, most physiologically too, as we prepare ourselves to go to bed, our body slows down, our heart rate slows down, we start to get cooler, our guts, our digestion starts to slow down, right? That's why we don't have to get up to go number 2 in the middle of the night, right? Like, everything is slowing down. And so, but you have to, in order to allow that true rest, gut rest, brain rest, body rest, it can't be interrupted with the work of feeding again. Like, we have to start to train that metabolic need in the day. I always tell my parents that the baby's job is to eat and play during the day. That's a baby's job. Eat and play during the day so that they can rest at night. So as early as you can start to teach that, just that natural rhythm of life by not allowing super long naps during the day,
Yes.
keeping them outside, keeping the lights on, no tipping around, no tiptoeing around, and then making a very distinct shift of swaddling, bassinet, back to sleep, quiet, cool, dark place at that 8, 9, 10, whatever you want bedtime to be, starting to make that very clear distinction from very early on. If parents start to do that and they're mindful of that, most parents really don't have to sleep train, because kids naturally start to have that rhythm and just naturally sleep. Their body will be ready to rest. So I talk to my families really, really early, because I want them to get that night-night rhythm. By 4 months, biologically, they do not need to eat in the middle of the night as long as they are growing well and developing normally. The more work you get done before that time, the less sleep training you will have to do.
100%. I love it when somebody comes to a parent consultation when they're like, we have sleep problems, and I'm like, please let them be 4 months old. I'm like,
it's a very different story.
That's different. Like I said, I have sleep problems at 4 months. Gotcha. This is gonna be fast. I have sleep problems at 5. Oh, okay. Let's have a conversation with you and your baby's brain, and we're gonna have to have a book and completely different scenario.
That's totally okay, but that is where the plan comes in, because as a pediatrician, like, my job is like, okay, you want this kid to sleep through the night? We got to start. You're not going to have the luxury of just deciding with a 2-year-old, I'd like him to sleep through the night now. Like, no.
Now you can sleep in your own room because we're going to have another baby. I'm like, no.
Like, you're not going to have the luxury of just being able to decide when you're done with that. You got to have a plan.
Yeah. No, usually I get we're having a baby. Yes. What do we do? I'm like, oh, okay. It's not for the next baby. We're going to talk about it from the get-go.
Oh, the next baby always sleeps better. That's
100%. Always. No, yes. We should write the book of, like, how to raise your firstborn like the secondborn.
Yeah. It'd be a very short book.
That would be really super short. Okay. One final little question, because we're running out of time. And this is another one that is close to my heart, and I want to debunk.
Okay.
So the HPV vaccine.
Oh, yes.
And teens and their physical health and their sexual health. My children's pediatrician, I absolutely respect the bejesus out of her. I really, really love her. And, I love it when she looks at me. She was like, okay, Lena, I'm going to talk to them now because it's my time to speak to them. And I'm like, oh, yes, I know what you're up to. Thank you. Fabulous. And she has this beautiful moment of sexual health with my children because it's their private time with their doctor. Right. There's so many myths around sexual health, around, I always tell parents, it's not just hormones. There's also huge neurological shifts in the adolescent brain. It's really the brain. And also parents making this choice to not give the HPV vaccine. And, I have a theory that since it's about sex, people have an opinion about it.
Mm-hmm.
So debunk it, give us information.
Yeah. So let's have that be the first thing that we're debunking, that the HPV vaccine has nothing to do with sex. Okay, we're going to pull this completely apart. Okay, now yes, and that has changed over the. I mean, we've been protecting kids against human papillomavirus, or HPV, for over a decade now, and we have learned so much about HPV science that's why we really do. I think that was a disservice to the vaccine at the beginning, completely focusing on the transmission of HPV sexually, because now we know that it's what I call a touch virus. So if I have HPV and I touch you, It doesn't matter if I'm touching you on the arm. It doesn't matter if I'm touching you anywhere. Like, it's just a touch virus. And how our kids are going to be touching other kids. So we primarily originally did HPV to protect against cervical cancer. We also know it's penile cancer, rectal cancers. But here's the other thing. Head and neck, esophageal, we're already seeing less polyps in babies whose mothers were vaccinated. We're even talking about HPV as and melanoma science or skin cancer science.
Oh,
so
wow.
This has really expanded our knowledge of virus-associated cancers. So, and Australia, when we look at our international friends, Australia has really been leading the international forefront with their HPV rates, and they are talking about in the next decade eradicating cervical cancer. Just imagine that, like eradicating a cancer from a vaccine. So the science is fascinating to me. Like, it is phenomenally fascinating. And so when kids come into my office, we start to give the sooner you get it, the sooner you get the HPV vaccine, the better antigen response, or the better the vaccine works, and the fewer doses you have to get. So okay. You get it so I give it to my kids when they are 10 and 11. I talk very openly that this is the cancer vaccine. I'm protecting your body against cancer, period. Like, that is the explanation. Just like I am protecting you against meningitis, which is a brain infection, I am protecting you against tetanus or lockjaw. I am protecting you against cancer. There is no sexuality in that statement whatsoever. I am just protecting my child against a vaccine-preventable group of cancers. And for any woman, for any family of any woman who has suffered from cervical cancer, for any family who has suffered from head and neck cancer, we know that these are horrendous, lethal cancers. And we have an ability to make a choice to not have our child suffer from that, which is phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. 100%, 100%. And, you know, anything that I didn't ask that you'd like to share about, anything you want parents to know as it pertains to...
Well, you put me on the spot and said that you remember something I said. I remember something you said, so I want you to say it again. When we were on this great webinar where I'm so glad that we met,
yes.
You said, it is not your job to make your child happy. And that is something that my mother told me when I was raising my itty bitties too. So I would love to hear you expand on that just a little bit more, because it just resonated and I just fell in love with you when you said that, because I just think that is so profound and important, especially in these upside down days that are full of disruption, to be able to reframe our responsibility, whether it comes to eating, whether it comes to sleep, whether it comes to all these things that we talked about. I think that essence of health and safety and happiness, I would just love to hear you finish it off.
Okay, so it's every parent, no matter who they are and how they ask me the question, they're just asking me to help them set a rule and for their child to be okay, for their child to not feel pain, for their child to not be mad with them, for their child to not tantrum. And because I kept understanding that communication under the communication, you know, I was like, oh, no. Life is going to be so much easier when we change your goal, right? Because our goal as parents cannot be that our children are happy, right? Because what makes children happy? You know, what makes a toddler happy? To be in your bed, to not sleep, to be on top of you 100% of the time. You know, to play, right? What makes a school-age child happy? You know, to play Roblox on you know, controllably, to not really do the homework that they don't agree with, to not read that book, you know, that makes them happy. What makes a teenager happy? You know, to always be with their friends, no curfew, you know, and so what we have to do as parents is to keep our children healthy and safe, and to let them know that that is our job, that is our task. Our task is, I keep you healthy and safe no matter what. And sometimes when we do that, we have to tolerate their emotional response, right? And, besides changing your goal from making them happy to keeping them healthy and safe, we as the adults, as part of our parenting journey, because we develop right along with them, they change us in ways that we could have never imagined prior to attempting to have this child. And one of the biggest challenges that a child will give you is that they will teach you how to handle conflict and rejection. Because in those moments when they're not happy and you are keeping them healthy and safe, you, the adult, is experiencing them as them having conflict with you and them rejecting you. And a lot of people get to 20, 30, 40, 50 avoiding those two things. And, there's a lot of internal work in parenting, but if you do it, it's so rewarding, because there's nothing like becoming a parent and accepting the journey of parenting to make you a better person.
So good. I love that. That's all you can, and when you're yelling on the top of the rooftop, you can yell that too.
I will yell that too. It's gonna be okay.
And you don't need to make your kids happy.
You don't have to be happy. It's okay. You just have to be healthy and safe. Put on that mask. Okay, bye. Thank you so much for doing this with me. I am so excited. This will live on our Facebook page. It will be there. It will eventually be on the website. You wrote to me, this could be a 5-part. Yeah, you know what? Maybe we'll break up the video as well. Because we have a lot of really, really great information. Some people commented, hi, Robin. The sex talk is scary. I'm so happy to have Lena walk me through the teens. Yay, let's do it. Yes, and the HPV vaccine. I'm so glad we talked about that, because I hear so many cuckoo crazy things. So thank you. And let's do this again soon.
Yes, it's my pleasure. Stay well.
Yes. All righty. Bye, everybody. Good night.